If you are looking for yet another region to review, you are in the right place. This week, we got Freljord. And honestly, I'm not going to lie, I'm very excited for this as well as the next three classes after this, as I'm sure you guys are as well. The first two were Piltover and Zon and Noxus. Both videos are going to be in the description below for those reviews. They're not exactly the most exciting classes. These next four classes, starting with Freljord in this video, had a lot better impact on the game and the metagame when they first came out. So, without further ado, my name is Justin, also known as Shit Just Works, and here comes a Freljord review. And first up, like always, we have Aggro. And honestly, much to nobody's surprise, Freljord is going to get a 1 out of 6 for Aggro. Honestly, overall, this region is more of a control archetype. So they do have some aggro cards. So if you go with, let's say, Scarred Reaver, right? I actually play tested this myself in one of those Noxus self-damage decks just to see if this would be worth it as a decent one-drop. That deck ended up turning into be more of a combo-oriented deck instead of aggro, so this turned out to be useless. Gut cut. You also have Scarthane Stefan. So when I survive damage, grant me +3/+0. So just like the Unscarred Reaver, same sort of strategy here. I don't know if Riot was trying to go for a self-damage archetype with Freljord as well. Maybe more of that will get ironed out with future sets. But honestly, there's just not much that benefits from the self-damage in Freljord other than these two cards. There is, obviously, which was also in that Noxus combo deck. Tark has the Tribeless, deal 1 to all battling units, so that could theoretically set off these effects. Again, that's really situational, and there's not enough additional Freljord aggro to really merit playing some sort of deck based around this strategy. There's also Alpha Wildclaw, which is honestly, I think, a pretty underrated card. I mean, a 6-drop 7/6 with Overwhelm seems very strong, but beyond that, they don't really have much in the form of aggro for this class, so that's why they're getting the 1 out of 6. Next up is Control, and honestly, again, much to nobody's surprise. Actually, you know, people could argue this. People could argue that I'm giving them a 6 out of 6. They could say that maybe Ionia is more Control, especially because of Deny, right? But they're getting the 6 for Control, and I'll tell you why. First off, the Frostbite mechanic. I think the Frostbite mechanic is extremely underrated right now. When I strike a unit with 0 power, kill it. So Frostbite makes everything 0 power. And this has Challenger. So you can literally snipe things with Rhymefang Wolf. You can, absolutely any unit in the game, you can kill it. So we got Brittle Steel, Burst Spell, Frostbite. This, honestly, I ended up putting, I want to say 3 of these in my deck that I had at the time. Same thing with Flash Freeze. I ended up maxing out on this because for 3 cost, frostbiting anything at burst speed is insane. If these were fast, I'd say, they're not that great. Having the ability to play these at burst speed makes them absolutely redonkulous if you're playing a Frostbite deck. Same goes for Harsh Winds. This right here, Winter's Breath, is really what makes this Frostbite mechanic work. Kill all enemies with 0 power, then Frostbite all enemies. So yeah, not only are you killing anything with 0, you also, anything that might be left over is still going to get frostbitten. So that ends up turning out to be a super, super good play. All of this combined with Ash, Rhymetusk Shaman, by the way, is also very good as a mid-range card. When you combine this with Ash, she levels up. Now enemies with 0 power can't block. So essentially, this turns into an OTK. You frostbite their field, you have free shot at their face to attack with absolutely anything. Beyond the frostbite mechanic, that's not even the good part, right? Beyond the frostbite mechanic, which already puts it at a pretty good spot as far as control, let's call it like a 4 out of 6, right? You have She Who Wanders. All right, we all know She Who Wanders. It no longer has regeneration because they nerfed the card. It's 10/10 for 10, and obliterate all followers with 4 or less power in play and in hands. That is insane. So this turned out to be the ultimate control card when you started making basically the She Who Wanders deck, which is just ramping up all the way to play She Who Wanders in addition to War Mother's Call. So War Mother's Call, which I'm sure many of you have already heard of as well. This is one of the most talked about cards in the game during the beta. So essentially you play a lot of these big units like She Who Wanders. This automatically summons her to the field. You don't get the Obliterate effect, but I mean, you're bound to draw one at some point for that effect. This is also another good control card, which also plays to Freljord's ramp ability. And the Coup de Grace, which I love this card because it is also, again, in the Noxus deck, which I know I continue to talk about. I still think it's going to be one of the best decks once the game releases. Avalanche. This is a great AoE clear. It's probably the best in the game. Also triggers any self-damage abilities, obviously, that you might have. So as far as control goes, AoE is right up Control's alley. Just yet another reason why they get a 6 out of 6. And next up, we have Combo. So I like Combo to me with Freljord is mainly ramp, right? So first, before we get into ramp, we have Tarkaz, right? So Tarkaz, which I already mentioned earlier, is also a combo enabler, especially for these self-damaging decks, again, like the Noxus deck. And you also have Anivia, which in and of itself, we all know Anivia, a broken combo card. The reason why I'm going to give them a 4 out of 6, which is towards the better end of combos here, is the ramp portion of, I just tried searching ramp. Unfortunately, this database does not know what ramp means. Ramp, if for those of you who have not played many card games, ramp is quickly gaining more mana than you're supposed to gain on a turn-by-turn basis so that you can essentially play stronger monsters before your opponent. So something like Wording Stones, start of round, get an extra mana gem this round. Catalyst of Aeons does get you an empty mana gem. So this actually increases your growth rate of your overall mana. So if you get one of these on turn 4, or even before turn, or even before turn like 6 or 7, you're in good shape. This will allow you to start ramping up quickly. We have mid-range up next, and mid-range is kind of where Freljord shines a little bit more. Unfortunately, I don't think many people would agree that a mid-range Freljord deck would be that great right now. I think most people tend to go towards the Anivia combo version of Freljord or the control version of Freljord. I personally love me some Braum. Okay, so Braum, if you do not know, after he levels up, has an effect where wherever he survives damage, summon a Mighty Poro. So this is the card in the region that combos with all those other self-damage cards that we just talked about. Braum works great with it. Every time it summons a Mighty Poro, which is actually a 3/3 with, I believe, Overwhelm. Yep, that floods the board a lot faster than you'd think. They also have cards like Avarosian Hearthguard, which is honestly in a lot of decks. Just because it's an overall good card. So this makes a lot of people want to splash Freljord into aggro-esque decks. This is also in the control version of Freljord with War Mother's Call because it boosts everything that's already insanely strong to even stronger. So it makes them even harder to deal with. They also have the Elnuk archetype. And the Elnuk archetype it's not that great right now. There's only 2 of them really, so you'd have to play the whole Elnuk engine, which is 3 of these and 3 of these. Not the greatest archetype right now, but technically that's mid-range. And I do consider this mid-range right now just because of the decks that I have made with it. But last but not least is Poro. And I actually loved playing the Poro deck that I had made. It had Augmented Experimenter in it to kind of like turbo through to getting a huge Heart of the Fluff going on. But this is very much a mid-range deck. It's kind of a fast mid-range deck. So the idea is that you make it to the mid-game with a far larger minion, follower, unit, whatever you want to call it, than your opponent has. And usually by turn 6, if you have Heart of the Fluff, you can do exactly that. So for that reason, they get a 4 out of 6 for mid-range. All right, next up we have the spells from Freljord. And honestly, I'm pretty impressed overall with Freljord spells. They're going to get a 4 out of 6. So a lot of these spells, honestly, a lot of them are the Frostbite. So the reason why they're not getting like a 5 or a 6 is because a lot of these are situational. The Frostbite spells very much need to be supported by the Frostbite deck archetype. A lot of Entreat, draw a champion. That's mainly useful in a very specific deck that relies on the champions. Poro Snacks, same thing. Now, there are some cards in here that are useful in many different decks, which is what keeps them at a 4. Catalyst of Aeons, great, all right? Avalanche can be used in a whole ton of decks. That is an awesome card. Take Heart, which is Braum's champion spell, is freaking awesome. Okay, this card is probably, in my opinion, one of the strongest cards in the game. A lot of people, I think, overlook it quite easily, but getting plus 3/3 for 3 cost at burst speed is insane in this game. It is absolutely bonkers. And I don't know, I expect this card to be in a lot of Freljord decks as this game progresses. This card will be very relevant into the future. And of course, War Mother's Call, which we already talked about. Battle Fury is actually an interesting card as well. 8 cost burst +8/+4 seems okay. That's more of a finisher if you're trying to win the game with maybe an Overwhelm card or something like that. It's basically 8 damage to your opponent. And another underrated card, which I think is an amazing spell, is Elixir of Iron. Give an ally +0/+2. Honestly, this can save a champion. It can save a unit. It's just a really good overall card. It can really mess with your opponent's plans on any particular turn for a very, very low investment. So I do think Elixir of Iron is actually a pretty good card. And Burst. So their Burst category is amazing. Their Burst category is getting a 6 out of 6. This, to me, is by far the best class for Burst spells, the best region for Burst spells. First off, they have 11 burst spells. That is the most burst spells of any region. So that's what stuck out to me first and foremost. And why that sticks out to me is because let's say you're worried about Deny with Ionia. If you are playing against an Ionian deck as a Freljord deck, generally speaking, their Deny will be useless. Okay, if we go back to all the spells they have here, you have Shatter, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have 6 non-burst spells. 6, okay? Shatter, you're probably not going to be playing. Tall Tales, you're probably not going to be playing. Pack Mentality, you're probably not going to be playing. So, between Avalanche, Winter's Breath, and War Mother's Call, those are the only Deny targets that they're going to have. Honestly, if you're not playing a Frostbite deck, you're probably not going to be playing Winter's Breath. So now it's between Avalanche and War Mother's Call. So, ideally, there's only going to be 2 targets that they're going to want to use Deny on. That's a max of 6 cards. You're definitely not going to be playing 3 War Mother's Call. Maybe you are. Depends, that control deck. Avalanche, same deal. You might be playing 3 of. Let's say 4 or 5 just to go in between. Honestly, that's a huge advantage in my mind to basically null and void a pretty powerful card for an archetype. So I think that this region is very deserving of a 6 out of 6 for Burst. And on top of that, like I said, these Burst spells are redonkulous. Take Heart and Elixir of Iron are great in basically any deck. Bloodsworn Pledge is also, I think, very underrated. You're getting +6 health for 4 mana between 2 allies is amazing. Catalyst of Aeons, Empty Mana Gem, and some heal. So you can use this as a quick burst heal if they're going to kill you, if they potentially have lethal. And on top of that, you even got something pretty cool like Poro Snacks, which is for an entire singular, very niche deck archetype, but it's actually amazing. Overall, 6 out of 6. And Champions are next. And Champions, they also have some of my favorite champions in Ash and Braum. Braum is probably in my top 3 favorite champions right now at this point in the game. They are getting a 6 out of 6 for Champions. Yes, Freljord is the class that's going to get 6. All right. To me, every single one of these champions can have a deck built around it. In fact, they all did. Tryndamere is, I believe, also in that War Mother's Call control deck. Anivia has an insane combo deck built around her effect with Shadow Isles, constantly reviving her and making duplicates of her. Ash, you can build a Frostbite control deck. And Braum is just, in and of itself, a amazing champion. He's great in the beginning of the game with Challenger and Regeneration. He can block a lot of attacks, and then once he does level up, you have a 3/3 Poro engine that is quite hard to take down and deal with. So, honestly, being that every single one of these champions can have almost it is a part of its own deck archetype is why this region is getting a 6 out of 6 for Champions. Next up, we have Followers, all right? For Followers, we are giving a 4 out of 6 for Freljord. So, again, they're definitely at the top half of the pack for followers, but they're just not quite at a 5 or a 6. So overall, the first thing that sticks out in a general sense is you have the Poro engine and you have the Elnux, all right? They're not amazing, all right? Poros are definitely fun. Elnux are definitely fun. They're not exactly the best deck archetypes out there. So what actually puts them at that 4 category? Well, for starters, we have Omen Hawk. This is a very highly played card. I personally don't think it's the greatest. The cost versus reward there ratio is very good. You're essentially getting a 3/3 for 1 mana. We also have the Rhymefang Wolf, which, like I mentioned earlier, is a very unique card in enabling its own archetype. Very interesting archetype. You have Wording Stones, again, which kind of enables a more control archetype. You have Babbling Bjerg, which also is a draw engine for yet another archetype that might not really just be Freljord. It combos with some other things. Actually, I tried it out in that Noxus deck at one point, being that Vlad is a 5 attack champion. And then there's also Tarkaz and some other things. And actually, real quick, I do want to mention Icy Yeti, which goes very well with that Frostbite mechanic as well. When I'm summoning Frostbite enemies with 3 or less health, it's another, full clear, quote-unquote, Frostbite. So overall, they do have a ton of good followers. Most of them are, in my eyes, are just good, right? She Who Wanders is obviously insane, and that's really what brings it from a 3 to a 4, because it's got that one huge power card follower. Everything else definitely assists in building other archetypes, but nothing else really stands out quite like She Who Wanders. And last but not least, the power cards. All right, so my power cards for Freljord. Obviously, I'll just lead with it. She Who Wanders. And then the other 2, you could probably guess as well. We have War Mother's Call and we have Anivia. Those 3 cards, very much, they made a huge impact during the beta. They had a part in defining the overall meta during the beta. These power, they're insane, okay? The effects alone, just even if you put them in a vacuum and just look at their effect, it's great, all right? And then when you open up Anivia to something like Shadow Isles, like everybody was doing during the beta, the card becomes absolutely insane to the point where it's probably going to have to get some sort of nerf, or some other card gets nerfed because of it. So for that reason, their power cards are by far and away the strongest and are getting a 6 out of 6. So to total it all up for Freljord, we have a 40 out of 54. So that is actually, with this being the 3rd video of all the regions so far, that puts Freljord in the lead. So right now we got Freljord at number 1. We'll see where they end up by the end of the next 3 videos, which will be Ionia, Demacia, and Shadow Isles, which I'm sure everybody's looking forward to. As always, thank you very much for watching. Appreciate the support. I hope you guys liked the review on Freljord. If you agree, if you disagree, put your thoughts in the comments below. I'm excited to see what everybody thinks. If you haven't already subscribed, what the heck are you waiting for? Hit that sub button. Also, if you liked the video, if you thought it was informative, smash that like button. Keep an eye out for the next video. That one is going to be reviewing Ionia. I am equally as excited to go through some of their cards. And as always, until next time, stay positive. Peace out.